What if Kensington Palace just proved Meghan Markle's children don't exist, and the world missed it? Imagine for a moment that everything we thought we knew about Archie and Lilibet, the two children who were meant to bridge the royal family's past and future, was nothing but smoke and mirrors. For years, the debate has raged quietly in online corners, whispered in royal circles, and dismissed by mainstream outlets. But then, suddenly, a spark, a leak, a file, a document, set fire to those whispers. And Kensington Palace, long accused of turning a blind eye, finally struck back. Tonight, we're not talking about speculation. We're talking about proof. Hard, undeniable proof that threatens to destroy Meghan Markle's most carefully crafted claims. And it all begins with what some are calling the Ghost Kid scandal. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The story begins in silence, not the kind that soothes, but the kind that hides. Back in 2019, when the world was still basking in the fairytale glow of Meghan Markle's royal transformation, all eyes were fixed on a baby named Archie Harrison. The royal press corps waited for weeks outside hospital doors that never opened. Photographers positioned themselves for a glimpse of the royal newborn that never came. And yet, somehow, a few days later, we were told that the baby had already been born, already introduced to the Queen, and already home. No official medical record was ever shown. No public confirmation of the attending doctors. Just a polished photo, one that analysts would later claim didn't even align with the timeline. It was strange, wasn't it? The royal family, for all its tradition, had always followed the same ritual. A hospital announcement, the easel at Buckingham Palace, the smiling parents waving from the steps, the newborn wrapped in royal white. But not this time. This time, there was distance. Privacy, Meghan called it. Protection, Harry insisted. Yet something about the whole thing felt off. Why did the palace seem uncertain about basic details? Why did reporters whisper that internal memos didn't match the official story? And why, in the weeks that followed, did Buckingham and Kensington suddenly go quiet whenever Archie's name came up? At first, it seemed like a small break from tradition, a modern couple doing things their way. But as the months went on, inconsistencies piled up like dominoes waiting to fall. Meghan claimed to have had a natural birth at a private London hospital, yet no one there recalled the event. Later, records surfaced showing staff schedules that didn't match her supposed delivery date. Meanwhile, royal aides quietly panicked behind the scenes, unsure how to respond to growing curiosity. One insider would later reveal, "We were told to say nothing. If we asked questions, we were told we didn't need to know." And then came Lilibet, the daughter supposedly born in California, far away from royal oversight. Again, there were no witnesses outside the family's carefully curated circle. No medical confirmation, no traditional christening, just a name, one that reignited a royal storm. Using the Queen's own childhood nickname for a child no one had ever truly seen felt, to many, like a slap in the face. Kensington reportedly lost it. Behind closed doors, senior figures began asking questions. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. The line of succession was at stake. If these children were truly royal heirs, their records needed to be documented. Verified. Secure. But here's where it gets chilling. According to leaked internal communications, Kensington didn't just ask questions. They started investigating. Quietly. Carefully. Without public acknowledgement. A small team was formed, what insiders later dubbed Operation Phoenix, tasked with verifying every detail surrounding the births. Their mission was clear: confirm the existence, the lineage, and the legitimacy of Archie and Lilibet once and for all. What they found, sources claim, was so explosive that it could undo years of royal silence. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter today? Why dig up the past when the royal family has moved on? Because, as of recently, that past has come roaring back. Multiple documents, digital records, and personal testimonies have surfaced, not from tabloids, but from within the palace system itself. Proof that Kensington not only found inconsistencies, but documented them. Proof that they preserved the evidence. And now, according to several insiders, that evidence may be finding its way to the public. The implications are staggering. If proven true, it wouldn't just mean Meghan Markle misled the world. It would mean that two individuals, celebrated as royal heirs, were never part of the lineage to begin with. It would mean the monarchy was deceived at its core, manipulated through compassion and modern optics. And it would mean the royal institution, so often accused of complacency, finally decided to fight back. But before we dive into the files, the metadata, and the testimonies, we need to understand how the illusion was built. Because illusions, by their nature, rely not only on deception but on desire, our desire to believe. Meghan's story was crafted with precision. The mixed-race duchess who broke barriers, the loving mother building a new legacy, the modern family carving their path away from royal rigidity. It was inspiring. It was cinematic. It was also, as Kensington's findings suggest, partly fiction. And fiction has a strange way of collapsing when the truth surfaces. Take the photos, for instance. In 2020, a digital forensics expert revealed that one of Archie's early photos contained metadata inconsistent with the claimed upload time. The image's lighting and shadows didn't match the date or location. The GPS data was wiped, a move often used to conceal source origins. The baby's facial features appeared oddly blurred, as though edited for alignment. These findings were brushed off by Sussex representatives as protective measures for privacy. But internally, Kensington's digital division took notice. They reportedly replicated the analysis and logged the results. Then there's the silence surrounding official documents. In the United Kingdom, royal births are traditionally registered under strict protocols, signed by attending physicians and verified by civil authorities. Yet the copies associated with Archie's birth changed, literally changed, weeks after being filed. Meghan's name was removed, replaced with Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. A clerical error, they said. A formatting issue, others claimed. But Kensington archivists saw something else: deliberate tampering. You don't alter a royal birth certificate unless you're covering something, one senior official later confided off record. By the time the couple relocated to California, Kensington's team had already built a pattern file. Inconsistencies, photographic anomalies, timing gaps, and witness contradictions. When Meghan announced Lilibet's birth from abroad, palace officials watched in disbelief. There was no legal or medical paper trail. The child's existence relied entirely on the couple's word and a single low-resolution photograph. It was like déjà vu, one aide said. Another baby, same mystery. Publicly, the royal family maintained its stance of diplomacy. Privately, they began to distance themselves. The Queen, known for her restraint, refused to address the matter publicly, but those close to her recall her disappointment. Her Majesty was never cruel, said one longtime household member. But she valued honesty above all else. And the lack of transparency hurt her deeply. That hurt, according to later reports, became one of the final rifts between the Queen and her grandson. Meanwhile, the internet took on a life of its own. Hashtags, theories, and online detectives dug deeper than ever before. Reddit threads dissected photos, comparing growth patterns and infant proportions. Twitter sleuths compared ear shapes and hairlines. While many of these efforts veered into the absurd, some findings caught the attention of professionals. A small group of digital archivists reached out anonymously to Kensington with evidence suggesting AI-based image manipulation in certain Sussex family photos. It sounded crazy, until one of them proved that the same baby image had been used across multiple supposed events, just slightly altered each time. At this point, Kensington had a choice: continue the quiet observation or escalate. They chose escalation. Operation Phoenix was officially authorized under a communications audit. Its cover story was a digital archiving project, harmless enough to avoid public curiosity. But beneath that cover was a meticulous forensic review of every public and private Sussex-related birth record, digital upload, and verified royal correspondence. Over the next several months, their findings painted a picture that could no longer be ignored. Even now, insiders remain cautious about what was discovered. Officially, none of it has been released. Unofficially, fragments have begun to surface. Documents cross-referenced with UK and US authorities, metadata logs, private testimonies, and even encrypted files shared within the palace network. The conclusion, whispered in corridors and now slowly leaking online, is chilling. The identities of Archie and Lilibet may not match what the world was told. That's why this story matters now. Kensington's quiet investigation may soon become public record. Legal advisors are reportedly preparing a strategy to address what's coming, not as a witch hunt, but as an act of institutional transparency. For a monarchy often accused of secrecy, this represents an extraordinary reversal. The truth, it seems, can no longer be contained. And yet, amidst all the speculation, one detail keeps surfacing, something about a file that ties everything together. A file reportedly labeled Project Ghostline. Insiders claim it's the key, the complete dossier containing photographic analysis, hospital testimonies, and genetic records. And that file, according to multiple palace correspondents, didn't originate from Buckingham or Clarence House. It came from Kensington. For years, people have asked, why doesn't the palace say something? Maybe, just maybe, they already have, just not in the way we expected. Maybe the strike wasn't public. It was strategic, silent, and surgical. Kensington struck back not through scandal, but through evidence. Evidence that would one day speak for itself. The question now is, what happens when that evidence sees the light of day? Because according to sources close to the investigation, the files are no longer under lock and key. They're circulating, quietly, carefully, and deliberately. And when they reach the right hands, the world's understanding of Archie, Lilibet, and Meghan Markle's carefully constructed narrative could implode overnight. But here's the twist. This isn't just a royal scandal. It's a test of truth itself. Can a carefully curated illusion survive the forensic scrutiny of reality? Can a brand built on motherhood, compassion, and victimhood withstand the cold precision of metadata and medical records? The stakes are bigger than royal gossip. This is about trust. Who holds it? Who breaks it? And who finally decides enough is enough? Because in the end, every lie leaves a trace. And when those traces lead straight to the heart of the monarchy, even silence becomes an answer. And as for Kensington, they've been silent for years. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means waiting, watching, and preparing. Because when the truth finally hits daylight, it won't just destroy illusions. It will redefine history. They called them the modern heirs. The symbols of a new royal generation, free, diverse, untethered from centuries of rigidity. Yet behind the smiling photographs and polished interviews, a darker whisper began to grow. Where are the children? It sounded absurd at first, like the kind of online rumor that spreads in echo chambers. But the longer people looked, the more those whispers began to sound like questions no one could answer. When Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was announced to the world, it was supposed to be a unifying moment. The baby of a prince and an American duchess. History rewritten, rebirth for the monarchy. But that illusion cracked before it even began. In May 2019, royal watchers camped outside Portland Hospital in London, expecting the traditional moment when the proud royal couple would step onto the steps with their newborn, just as Diana had done with William and Harry. Hours turned into days. Then, out of nowhere, the announcement came. The baby had already been born. There was no hospital photo, no witness accounts, and no official acknowledgement from medical staff. Just a tightly cropped photo, Meghan's arm wrapped protectively around a baby wrapped in white, and a palace statement declaring the new arrival healthy and thriving. Something didn't feel right. Normally, the royal media machine thrives on spectacle. The first appearance of a royal baby is not just tradition, it's global diplomacy. Every camera, every smile, every public handshake becomes part of history. But with Meghan and Harry, that script vanished. There were no steps, no photographers, no royal doctors giving briefings. Even the Queen's visit was shrouded in confusion. One moment, palace aides said she had met the baby. Hours later, other sources contradicted it. Then came the strangest part, Meghan's insistence on secrecy. She declared that her child was not public property, a statement that stunned those inside the palace. Every royal birth for centuries has been a public matter, one courtier later recalled. It's part of the crown's continuity. Without public legitimacy, the line becomes a rumor. And that rumor, ironically, is exactly what began to spread. At first, online communities focused on minor inconsistencies, a slightly different blanket pattern in photos, lighting that didn't match the supposed time of day, a baby's face that never seemed to stay consistent between images. Some dismissed it as lighting or camera distortion, others as the couple's obsession with privacy. But when the British press began receiving legal warnings for even asking questions about the birth's logistics, curiosity turned to suspicion. Then, an anonymous hospital staffer from Portland quietly told a reporter that no royal booking appeared on the hospital's private ledger for that date. "We had deliveries that week, yes," the source claimed, "but no security lockdown, no red zone, no royal protocol. That kind of event would be impossible to hide." The journalist's story never made print. Legal pressure silenced it before publication, but fragments of the testimony leaked online. For the first time, people began asking whether the Duchess of Sussex had ever given birth in the UK at all. And just like that, the narrative cracked open. Weeks later, a different mystery emerged. On the official birth certificate released to the public, Meghan's full name, Rachel Meghan Markle, was suddenly replaced with Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. The palace called it a clerical adjustment. Meghan later blamed royal aides, but internal sources suggested something more deliberate. The correction didn't come from Buckingham's records office, it came from outside. A royal registrar insider would later claim that someone requested the change to reduce personal traceability. Why? No one seemed willing to answer. From then on, every public appearance of Archie seemed strategically calculated. There were only a handful of photos, all heavily edited, all controlled by the Sussex PR team. During their 2019 South Africa tour, Meghan held a child said to be Archie. Yet even then, experts noticed anomalies. The baby's hair color seemed different from earlier photos. His face was turned away in every frame. "We were told not to photograph the baby's face directly," one press photographer later confessed. They said it was a privacy matter, but it felt more like control. Control. That word would come to define the entire Sussex image. Every detail, every moment, every photo seemed designed not to capture reality, but to curate it. Meghan spoke often of authenticity in interviews, yet the family she presented seemed increasingly fictional. And when they finally stepped away from royal duties, the narrative took an even stranger turn. In 2021, during their infamous Oprah Winfrey interview, Meghan and Harry introduced the idea of a second child, a daughter named Lilibet Diana, born in California. But just as before, the story unfolded under a cloud of secrecy. No medical staff confirmed the birth. No official birth certificate appeared for months. And when one finally did, skeptics pointed out oddities, formatting inconsistencies, missing verification codes, and handwriting that didn't match standard state forms. It felt, as one analyst put it, like a placeholder, not a document. The photographs of Lilibet were even rarer than Archie's. The Sussexes released a few images, grainy, perfectly lit, and suspiciously uniform in composition. Each one looked like it had been lifted from the same photo shoot, yet Meghan claimed they were taken on different dates. Even more bizarrely, the children never appeared in public with their parents, not at events, not during their Netflix documentary filming, not in candid paparazzi shots. "Every celebrity in California gets spotted at least once," said a local reporter in Montecito. "But not these two kids. It's like they don't exist outside the camera lens." This led to the online nickname, the Ghost Heirs of Montecito, a name that once seemed cruel, until insiders began quietly validating that something might actually be wrong. Behind the scenes, palace staff were panicking. Kensington aides, who normally maintained distance from Sussex matters, began receiving internal memos asking for documentation. It started as routine succession verification, one aide later recalled. But when no documentation came back, no hospital record, no doctor's signature, nothing, people got nervous. The Crown must legally maintain accurate lineage documentation. If there were gaps, they needed to be filled. But every request hit a wall. Sussex representatives cited privacy, confidentiality, or relocation issues. Eventually, one senior official realized that Kensington had no verified medical record for either Archie or Lilibet. None. Think about that for a moment. Two royal heirs, 8th and 9th in line to the British throne, and not a single confirmed file verifying their births exists within official royal archives. What do you do when the truth refuses to reveal itself? According to palace insiders, that's when the whispers turned into action. Kensington commissioned a quiet, internal inquiry, a background verification under the guise of routine digital record maintenance. It wasn't an official investigation at first, but rather an internal audit of photos, files, and media releases connected to the Sussex children. But what began as a data exercise quickly evolved into something far more serious. There were anomalies everywhere, said one digital archivist who later spoke anonymously. Metadata didn't match upload times. File names were inconsistent. Even timestamps on Palace press releases seemed edited retroactively. At that point, the illusion began to collapse. People inside the palace started using the term ghost files to describe the Sussex data. Entire folders connected to their family archives appeared to have been modified or replaced after the couple's departure. The digital footprints were fragmented, files copied, renamed, or scrubbed clean. It looked like someone wanted to erase a timeline, said the insider. But digital ghosts don't disappear completely. They always leave traces. And those traces pointed somewhere, to Montecito, California. When investigators quietly reached out to verify birth data through American records, they found yet another wall. State confidentiality laws prevented access to most medical records, and what little information was available showed discrepancies. For instance, Lilibet's alleged birth certificate listed a doctor who, upon inquiry, denied being present at any royal birth. His office released a carefully worded statement confirming he could not comment on any private medical matters. Translation: something didn't add up. At this stage, even royal allies began to shift uncomfortably. There were too many missing pieces, too many coincidences. Former palace press secretaries who had once defended Meghan started hedging their words in interviews. The Sussexes value privacy above all else, one said cautiously. They have a right to protect their family. But behind that polished neutrality was fear. Fear that someone, somewhere, was sitting on evidence that could unravel the entire Sussex brand. Because if the children weren't born as claimed, or if their identities had been misrepresented, the consequences would reach far beyond gossip. It would mean the monarchy had unknowingly endorsed a lie. It would mean documents signed by royal officials were based on false premises. And it would mean every photograph, every Netflix episode, every speech about motherhood and resilience was built on illusion. Still, Kensington couldn't move without proof. To accuse without evidence would trigger a global media war. So they waited. They watched. They gathered. And when that evidence finally began to surface, it didn't come from hackers or journalists. It came from within the palace walls themselves. But before that turning point, something else happened, something that sent shivers through royal corridors. During one of Harry's rare solo visits to London, he was reportedly asked to provide updated documentation for succession purposes. A simple administrative request. Yet sources claim he grew defensive, even panicked. He refused to provide anything, said one insider. He said, "You don't need that." But we did. The conversation reportedly ended abruptly, with Harry leaving the meeting red-faced. Within weeks, Meghan's lawyers began sending letters warning the palace to respect family privacy. The timing was no coincidence. From that moment forward, the relationship between Kensington and the Sussexes shifted from tense to adversarial. The palace, once silent, started preparing. They compiled digital forensics, archived testimonies, and created redundancy backups in case files went missing. Some claim that's when the project received its informal nickname, Operation Phoenix, the quiet rebirth of truth. Meanwhile, the public grew restless. Online interest in the so-called ghost kids exploded. Every new photo drop was dissected like evidence in a courtroom. Analysts compared baby eye colors, growth patterns, even bone structure. "We weren't conspiracy theorists," one researcher later explained. "We were just asking, why are there no verifiable candid photos of these children in 4 years?" It was a fair question, one that even media allies of Meghan began to ask behind closed doors. And while all this unfolded, something else brewed in Kensington's basement. A small team of digital analysts who, with royal approval, began tracking every Sussex media upload from the day of Archie's supposed birth. They weren't looking for scandal. They were looking for truth. And what they discovered, line by line, file by file, would eventually rock the royal world. Because if there's one thing technology never forgets, it's time. Every file, every photo, every video carries a hidden signature, a timestamp that can't be erased without leaving scars. And those scars, as Kensington would soon discover, told a story no PR team could rewrite. It It was the story of two children who appeared only when the cameras were ready. Two heirs who existed everywhere and nowhere at once. And a royal couple whose version of reality was about to face its first forensic reckoning. But as shocking as those findings were, the first real crack in Meghan's narrative didn't come from the data. It came from a human voice, someone who had been there from the very beginning. Someone who couldn't stay silent any longer. They called it routine digital maintenance. That was the official explanation printed on the internal memo, a harmless phrase meant to lull curiosity and keep the press at bay. But inside the quiet offices of Kensington Palace, everyone knew better. This wasn't maintenance, it was containment. The order had come down discreetly, passed not through public channels, but whispered between trusted aides and analysts. The mission had one purpose: verify the existence of Archie and Lilibet Mountbatten-Windsor. And, if necessary, expose the truth. The operation was nicknamed Phoenix, a symbol chosen not for rebirth, but resurrection. Because what Kensington was about to do wasn't just about proving a story right or wrong. It was about reviving the integrity of the monarchy itself. It began with a meeting that never officially happened. Late evening, inside one of the smaller briefing rooms behind the palace library, 6 individuals gathered under orders that bypassed traditional hierarchy. 3 were senior aides, 2 were digital archivists, and 1 was a forensic consultant borrowed from a government division whose name remains redacted in all internal references. They sat in silence as the lead advisor laid out the problem on the table, a folder labeled Succession Verification Irregularities. Inside that folder were 3 documents. The first was a letter from the Privy Council office requesting updated information for the line of succession, as per royal protocol. The second was a memo from the Royal Archives confirming that the births of Archie and Lilibet had never been formally authenticated through the traditional channels used for royal heirs. The third was an encrypted data stick, the one piece of physical evidence linking the Sussex family's media files to the palace's official database. "We don't have confirmation of their birth certificates," the advisor said quietly. "Not from the hospital, not from the registrar, not from the Royal Archives. If this gets out, we're not facing scandal. We're facing institutional collapse." The room went cold. The consultant leaned forward. "So we find out the truth," he said. Quietly. That single word, quietly, would define everything that followed. From that moment on, Operation Phoenix became a ghost project within the palace. Invisible, undocumented, answerable only to the highest levels of Kensington. Even Buckingham wasn't fully informed. "We didn't want to trigger a constitutional panic," one insider later explained. "If it turned out to be false, we'd ruin reputations. If it turned out to be true, we'd trigger a royal crisis. Either way, this had to stay buried until we had facts." The team set up a secure digital workspace in a restricted wing of the palace. The walls were soundproof. The computers were air-gapped, completely disconnected from the internet. Inside that room, the world's oldest institution quietly began its most modern investigation. The first task was data collection. Every publicly released photograph, video, press statement, and digital file associated with the Sussex children was catalogued chronologically. That meant sifting through terabytes of media, from official royal archives to social media posts, Netflix footage, and streaming documentaries. At first, it seemed tedious, the kind of clerical drudgery one might expect from government analysts. But soon, the patterns emerged. The timestamps didn't match. One photo Meghan claimed was taken in Frogmore Cottage had GPS metadata placing it thousands of miles away, somewhere in Los Angeles. Another, released to celebrate Archie's first birthday, contained an editing signature from a known PR agency in Beverly Hills, an agency that didn't exist when the photo was supposedly taken. Even more concerning were the upload inconsistencies. Files meant to be released weeks apart shared identical digital fingerprints, suggesting they were all created during a single session. In other words, the images were pre-manufactured, staged. That revelation sent shockwaves through the team. "It was like realizing the fairy tale was a storyboard," said one of the digital specialists. Everything was pre-planned. The releases weren't documenting reality. They were constructing it. Still, the palace couldn't move on photo evidence alone. They needed something verifiable, medical, legal, tangible. That's when the operation expanded. Kensington's liaison with the British consulate in Los Angeles discreetly contacted U.S. authorities under the pretext of updating royal records for dual citizenship procedures. It was a delicate move, skirting diplomatic boundaries. What they found raised even more alarms. The California Records Office confirmed that the state birth records for Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor existed, but the document had been sealed under restricted access due to privacy and identity protection laws. When requested for cross-verification under international registry standards, the response was unusual: no physician of record. That detail set off alarms in every corner of Kensington's legal department. In the United Kingdom, royal births are attended and certified by physicians approved by the Crown. Every name, every signature, every stamp becomes part of royal history. To omit that detail is unheard of. To hide it? Unthinkable. It was at that moment that the head of communications made the call. This could no longer remain an audit. It was now an active verification. Operation Phoenix officially began. The next step was human intelligence. Quiet inquiries were sent to staff members who had worked during Archie's supposed birth at Frogmore Cottage. Most refused to speak. But one, a mid-level staffer who had since retired, broke the silence. There was tension, she said. We were told not to ask questions. When the baby was supposedly brought to the cottage, it was under unusual circumstances. The doors were closed. No staff were allowed in. Even the nanny was rotated out at the last minute. That testimony aligned with another witness, a former security driver who had accompanied deliveries to and from the cottage. He described receiving sealed crates marked fragile that were carried into the residence by private contractors instead of palace logistics. They weren't baby supplies, he said. They were equipment. Cameras, lights, monitors. That's when the operation took a darker turn. A theory began forming among the team that certain media releases showing private moments between Meghan, Harry, and their children weren't candid at all. They were staged recordings, possibly pre-filmed for future use. The file's metadata supported it. The lighting, the audio balance, the framing, all consistent with studio production. But no one dared say it out loud. Until one analyst finally did. What if, he asked, the kids were never actually there? The room went silent. No one responded. It was too dangerous an idea to entertain, yet impossible to ignore. If the royal children were fabrications, or if their images were composites or stand-ins, the implications were catastrophic. At this point, the operation began looping in experts outside the palace under coded consultancy contracts. One was a digital forensics specialist who had previously worked for MI5. Her task: determine whether any photos or videos of the Sussex children had been digitally altered. She ran a full suite of forensic imaging tests. The results were startling. Several files showed signs of digital layering, overlapping pixels inconsistent with standard camera captures. Some faces appeared to have been superimposed. In one case, a shadow cast on the floor didn't match the object casting it. This isn't just photo retouching, she said in her report. This is image fabrication. Still, Kensington tread carefully. Without physical verification, hospital documentation, DNA confirmation, or first-hand testimony, the evidence could be dismissed as speculative. So they decided to take a calculated risk. A covert outreach was made to Portland Hospital, where Meghan claimed to have given birth to Archie. The hospital, bound by patient confidentiality, refused to comment. But one of the nurses, a woman in her 60s who had served in the maternity ward for decades, privately agreed to speak off record. What she said stunned the investigators. There was no royal birth that day, she whispered. We were told there might be, but it never happened. No security sweep, no locked floor, nothing. It was a normal day. The Kensington advisor who recorded her testimony reportedly left the meeting pale and shaken. The nurse's statement would become one of the earliest pieces of human evidence confirming the palace's suspicions, and it would later trigger a wave of internal panic once Meghan's lawyers got wind of it. Because within days of that interview, legal letters began pouring in. Threats, injunction warnings, and privacy notices. The Sussex legal team somehow learned about the palace's inquiries. They demanded all investigations cease immediately. This was the moment we realized they were watching us as closely as we were watching them, said one palace official. But by then, Operation Phoenix had already gone too far to stop. The team had secured encrypted backups of all findings, stored in multiple off-site vaults, each labeled under nondescript categories. The digital division created redundancy, a fail-safe that ensured that even if files were deleted, mirrors existed elsewhere. "We knew this might end up in court someday," said the forensic specialist. "We wanted everything traceable, verifiable, and unalterable." Inside the palace, rumors began spreading. Some called the operation treasonous. Others saw it as justice. But regardless of motive, everyone understood one thing. The truth was no longer hidden behind gossip. It was being built, piece by piece, by the very institution Meghan had accused of abandoning her. Still, the team needed a smoking gun. Metadata, photos, testimonies. They were compelling, but circumstantial. What they needed was a physical trace, something that could connect biological identity to royal lineage. And in an almost cinematic twist, that's exactly what they got. During a private security audit of one of Harry's past trips to the UK, a personal effects check turned up an item that would later become central to the case: a sealed envelope, stored in a medical courier pouch marked private genetic record. It had been logged years earlier under a now-defunct Royal Medical Code. At first, no one knew what it contained. But once tested and verified, it revealed something that changed everything. Because inside that envelope was DNA evidence. Evidence that contradicted every public claim about the Sussex children's lineage. That discovery would come to define the next chapter of this saga. It would pit Kensington's quiet analysts against Meghan's global PR army, the royal truth against Hollywood illusion, and turn a secret operation into the most dangerous royal investigation in modern history. But before that envelope was opened, before the world learned what it held, the palace's silent task force had to face its first test of loyalty. Someone within their own ranks had been compromised, and the leak that followed nearly destroyed everything they had built. It started with a single file, a photograph Meghan Markle's team claimed was taken in the nursery of Frogmore Cottage. To the public, it was a simple, tender moment. Meghan cradling baby Archie near a window with sunlight pouring through lace curtains. But to Kensington's Operation Phoenix team, that image was the Rosetta Stone. It held answers hidden not in the pixels themselves, but in the invisible code beneath them. Because in the digital world, truth hides in the details. And details never lie. Metadata is the fingerprint of a digital file, a hidden diary that records everything. When it was taken, where it was taken, what device was used, even the camera's unique sensor signature. It can be altered, but never perfectly. Kensington's analysts knew this better than anyone. So when they began peeling back the layers of the Sussex photo archive, they weren't looking for faces. They were looking for timestamps. At first glance, the photo looked legitimate. The background matched Frogmore's known color palette. The furnishings resembled those reportedly gifted by the Queen herself. But something didn't fit. The light streaming through the window, it wasn't consistent with the time of day in Windsor. According to the palace records, the photo was released in early May, mid-afternoon. Yet the light angle in the reflection indicated a late evening sun, typical of Southern California, not London. Curious, the analysts extracted the EXIF data, the hidden metadata embedded in the image. Within seconds, the illusion shattered. The coordinates listed didn't correspond to Frogmore Cottage at all. They pointed to a location 5,400 miles away, a private residence in Los Angeles. The date stamp? 2 weeks before the supposed time of the photo's release. The camera model? A US-registered Canon device, never logged by any royal photographer. The lead analyst looked up from the screen. "This wasn't taken in the UK," she said quietly. At first, the room went silent. Then the questions began to fly. Who took the photo? Why falsify the location? And if Meghan wasn't in London at the time, where had she been? The simplest explanation was human error, a mislabeled image. But the deeper they dug, the less likely that seemed. Because every image tied to that particular device ID shared the same anomalies, the same false timestamps, the same erased GPS data, all wiped manually, all reinserted later through editing software. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate reconstruction. The analysts decided to compare this image with the others in the Sussex media catalog. What they found was astonishing. Nearly all of the so-called family photos, the ones used in Christmas cards, interviews, and public press releases, originated from a narrow time window, a span of just 9 days. Different outfits, different backdrops, different supposed locations, all created in less than 2 weeks. It was like watching a movie being filmed out of order. The file's metadata revealed even more. The naming conventions, the file numbers, weren't sequential, as they would be from a camera. Instead, they followed a renaming pattern consistent with photo studio batch exports. "This is production work," one analyst said. "These aren't family photos. They're deliverables." That word, deliverables, changed everything. It suggested the images weren't spontaneous moments from a private family, but products, content created for release under contractual terms. That realization connected a new dot, Netflix. During their partnership with Netflix, Meghan and Harry promised exclusive behind-the-scenes access to their lives. "Every royal photo tells a story," the digital forensic consultant explained during one of her briefings. "But these tell a story about what didn't happen." By now, the Kensington team had seen enough to move beyond coincidence. The operation shifted from data analysis to pattern mapping. They built a digital timeline, a massive wall projection showing every Sussex media release, photo, and interview since 2019. When arranged by date, the inconsistencies glared like red flags. Weeks where no public appearances occurred coincided with new photos being released. Metadata traced those files to older shoot sessions. Even the supposed birthday photos of Archie and Lilibet were duplicates of earlier sessions with lighting and color grading adjustments. Then came the moment that confirmed the worst suspicions. One of the analysts noticed a peculiar signature hidden deep in the EXIF data of several high-resolution photos, a unique hexadecimal tag referencing editing software not typically used by amateurs. It was traced back to a firm in Beverly Hills specializing in digital compositing, the art of blending multiple photos seamlessly into one. That firm had previously worked on celebrity rebranding campaigns and even confidential privacy reconstruction projects, where clients wished to disguise locations or identities in images. A palace auditor quietly reached out under the guise of an anonymous client. When asked whether the firm had worked with a client resembling the Sussexes, the representative declined to comment, but accidentally revealed something telling. "All our projects are signed under NDAs with Archwell Productions," she said, before abruptly hanging up. That slip confirmed what the palace feared. The Sussex images were being handled, edited, and repackaged by professionals, the same kind who build visual illusions for marketing campaigns. Still, the palace couldn't act on this alone. The evidence was damning, but circumstantial. What they needed was external validation, a third-party digital verification that could withstand legal scrutiny. So they reached out to an independent cybersecurity consultant in Switzerland, a man known for tracing state-level photo fabrications. He agreed to analyze 3 sample images. His report, delivered in a sealed envelope 3 weeks later, was blunt. All 3 photos have undergone significant digital manipulation inconsistent with standard retouching. Indicators suggest compositing of separate image elements, including but not limited to lighting, texture, and background discrepancies. In layman's terms, they were fake. But the report also included something else. Attached to the analysis was a short note. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. The goal wasn't to create something real. It was to create something believable. The distinction mattered, because it meant the illusion was crafted not to deceive forensic experts, but to manipulate public emotion. And it worked. The world had believed the fairy tale. Every major outlet had reprinted those photos. Every magazine had celebrated the Sussex family moments. They had sold authenticity, and people bought it. Now, Kensington had the receipts. Still, no one wanted to move prematurely. "We were standing on a landmine," recalled one member of the team. "Every decision could change royal history. We needed absolute certainty." So they decided to cross-reference the findings with royal communication logs. The theory was simple. If the metadata proved the photos weren't taken when claimed, the internal scheduling records would expose contradictions. And they did. The calendar entries for the Sussex household listed no official photographers or in-house staff on the days the photos were allegedly taken. In fact, several of those days coincided with Meghan and Harry being overseas. "How do you appear in 2 places at once?" the analyst muttered. The deeper they went, the more disturbing the patterns became. There were signs of coordinated file suppression, timestamps modified across multiple devices, identical shadow anomalies across different days, even mirror image patterns in background elements. They reused the same image fragments, said the forensic consultant. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The same lamp, the same stuffed toy, even the same wrinkle in the curtain, repeated across supposedly different photos. At this point, the investigation had evolved into something unprecedented, a full-scale forensic audit of a royal narrative. And with every revelation, the illusion cracked further. But not everyone inside the palace was pleased. Senior aides feared the optics of what was unfolding. If this ever leaks, warned one official, the monarchy will look like it's spying on family. But others argued it wasn't about family, it was about truth. You can't rewrite royal bloodlines with Photoshop, said another. The final blow came when analysts discovered discrepancies not just in the photos, but in the videos. A key sequence from the Sussex documentary showed Harry and Meghan watching their first moments as parents on a laptop. The clip zooms in on baby Archie's face. Yet the frame's reflection in the laptop screen revealed something odd. The reflection didn't match the video playing. It was inverted, reversed, and slightly out of sync. When slowed down and color-corrected, analysts realized why. The video had been composited, edited to merge separate shots into one seamless narrative. In short, the home video of Archie wasn't home at all. It was post-production. That revelation broke the team's last trace of doubt. What they were witnessing wasn't just a pattern of media misrepresentation. It was a coordinated campaign of digital storytelling. A manufactured reality built to preserve the Sussex brand's emotional currency. By now, the data analysts were exhausted. Every night blurred into the next. Every revelation heavier than the last. They had enough evidence to prove manipulation, maybe even fabrication, but still no proof of physical identity. The metadata had told its story, but it was only half the truth. Then came a break they didn't expect. A seemingly ordinary correspondence from the Royal Archives arrived one morning. A scanned copy of a UK birth registry form. Nothing unusual at first glance, until one analyst noticed a tiny anomaly in the document's metadata signature. The file's digital creation date was months after its official issue date. In other words, the document had been recreated after the fact. The original? Missing. That was when one of the senior investigators said the words no one wanted to hear. If the metadata is telling us the documents are fake and the photos are fake, what else is? No one answered. Outside, the world continued to adore the Sussex family. Inside, the palace was staring into a void of uncertainty, a digital illusion so perfect it had almost fooled history itself. But the palace wasn't done digging. The metadata had revealed manipulation. Now, they needed to find where the truth began, and that meant going straight to the source, the hospital. Because while metadata might not lie, neither do medical records. And what Kensington found behind those sealed hospital doors would make everything so far look tame. The night rain came down over London like a whispered warning. It slicked the cobblestones outside Kensington, drumming against the windows of the archive office where Ethan Reeves sat staring at a single email that had just changed everything. It was a short message, only 7 words long, but its implications felt heavy enough to crack the floor beneath him. No record of a birth that day. For months, Ethan and his covert team, known only in internal circles as Operation Phoenix, had been combing through data, metadata, and digital footprints tied to the mysterious heirs of House Howridge, the breakaway royal family whose reputation had split the monarchy in two. They'd found photo inconsistencies, mismatched timestamps, and composite images so perfectly faked they could have fooled the Queen's own portrait painter. But this was different. This was physical proof, or rather, the absence of it. The birth that was supposed to anchor the Howridge bloodline had never been logged at the private St. Helena hospital. He rose from his chair and paced. "Run it again," he told Maya, the cybersecurity lead. "Check every ward, every wing. We can't rely on a single registry." Maya didn't look up from her screen. "I ran it 3 times. The dates you gave me, nothing. No patient under the Duchess's aliases, no security sweep, no royal file tag. Could it have been misfiled?" She finally turned. If it was misfiled, it would still exist. This looks like it was erased. The word hung in the air like a curse. The next morning, Ethan crossed the Thames under a low gray sky and entered St. Helena through the side door used for VIP arrivals. The lobby was quiet, antiseptic, a place that smelled of coffee, bleach, and bureaucracy. He'd come armed with a simple cover story, an archivist verifying sealed royal documents. It wasn't even a lie. It was just missing the part about investigating whether the most celebrated birth of the decade had ever happened. The receptionist, a woman with tired eyes and a practiced smile, flipped through her computer. Royal file? We have dozens of those, Mr. Reeves. You'll need to specify the event. He handed over the date. 3rd of May, 2019. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. She frowned. We didn't have a royal delivery that week. Are you sure? I'm quite sure, she said, her tone soft but final. If there had been one, you'd have seen the chaos. We closed down whole floors for those. Ethan thanked her, walked out into the drizzle, and dialed his team. She's right, he said. There was no royal delivery. The staff remember nothing. It's like the event was scripted somewhere else. Back in Kensington, the team gathered around the briefing table. A dozen faces, lit by computer screens and fatigue. Maya projected a map onto the wall, St. Helena's floor plan, every ward color-coded. No recorded lockdown, she said. No security passes logged. No visiting dignitaries, no hospital photography clearance. The only anomaly is here. She pointed to a small storage wing off the maternity unit. Security cameras went dark for 6 hours on the night of the supposed birth. Power outage. Coincidence, someone asked. Not unless the outage conveniently targeted every feed covering that corridor. Ethan's stomach tightened. Who has access to that part of the hospital? Private contractors, Maya said. Same firm that did security for Howridge House during their wedding. Name of the company is Argent Shield. That name had come up before. Argent Shield had shadowed every major event tied to the Howridge couple. The wedding, the interviews, the charity galas that later turned into media smokescreens. They were efficient, invisible, and expensive. Pull their contracts, Ethan said. I want to know who hired them. 3 days later, the answer arrived. Not the palace. Not the hospital. The contract originated from an offshore corporation based in Malta, registered under a shell company named Silvermark Productions. It wasn't a security firm at all. It was a film services outfit. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. So whoever arranged that night didn't just want protection, he said slowly. They wanted footage. He could almost hear the gears turning in the room. The metadata inconsistencies, the staged photos, the perfectly lit nursery shots, they all fit. Maybe there had been a birth scene, but not a birth. A performance. A reconstruction designed to look real enough to withstand questions, long enough for public memory to harden into belief. 2 days later, Operation Phoenix received an encrypted package through their back channel. No sender name, no traceable origin. Inside, 6 still images, time-stamped to the same date as the phantom outage. They showed a dim hospital corridor, portable lights, a small crew surrounding a bed draped in royal linens. In the center, a woman whose face was obscured by surgical cloth. Maya studied the images frame by frame. No blood, no instruments, no medical monitors. Look at the hands. Ethan leaned closer. The woman's hands were gloved, but wrong. Stage gloves, not medical. Satin, not latex. Someone filmed a reenactment, Maya said softly. Or propaganda, Ethan muttered. The team debated for hours whether to push forward or shut down. Every revelation carried a risk. If they were wrong, they'd destroy innocent reputations. If they were right, they'd unmask a fraud that could fracture the monarchy forever. In the end, they chose the truth. Ethan scheduled a clandestine meeting with a retired nurse who had served at St. Helena for 30 years. She agreed to meet him in a park, beneath the cover of spring fog. She arrived in a gray coat, eyes darting, voice trembling. I shouldn't be talking to you, she said, but it's been haunting me. Tell me what you saw. I was on the night shift that week. The supervisor told us to prepare for a possible VIP birth, but it never happened. Then 2 nights later, a private team came in, said they were conducting a film simulation for training purposes. They brought their own equipment, their own lights. We weren't allowed near the room. When they left, everything was spotless, like no one had ever been there. Did you see the mother? The nurse shook her head. No, but I heard her voice once. American. Soft, rehearsed. She said, Let's make it quick. Ethan's chest tightened. Did anyone report it? She looked at him sadly. To who? The palace? They already knew. That night, Ethan walked the empty corridors of Kensington Palace. Rain tapped at the old glass like restless fingers. He stopped before a portrait of Queen Eleanor, the monarch who, centuries earlier, had exiled her own son for forging a royal marriage document. History, he thought grimly, had a strange way of repeating itself. He called Maya. We're going public, he said. Are you insane? We don't have final proof. We have enough to ask the question. Once you ask it, you can't take it back. He paused. Maybe it's time someone didn't. The leak dropped 3 days later. Not from Ethan directly, but from an anonymous account that mirrored the team's encrypted uploads. A short video compilation, the corridor footage, the metadata readouts, the nurse's distorted testimony. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Hashtags exploded. News anchors demanded explanations. St. Helena Hospital released a statement calling the footage an unauthorized training simulation. Silvermark Productions denied involvement. The Howrage press office dismissed it as a cruel fabrication. But the world had seen enough to start doubting. Inside Kensington, phones rang nonstop. Advisors scrambled to contain fallout. Ethan's team was ordered to stand down, their access revoked, their files sealed. But the truth had already escaped. In the weeks that followed, new witnesses emerged, technicians, junior nurses, even a janitor who remembered cleaning a delivery suite that smelled of cameras, not birth. Each story added another thread to the growing tapestry of doubt. And then came the final twist. One evening, Maya stormed into Ethan's office holding a flash drive. You need to see this, she said, breathless. On the drive was a log of data transfers from Silvermark's archive servers. Dozens of video files had been sent to a client code named Motherbird. One of them bore the title, Howrage Birth, Final Cut. Motherbird. Ethan repeated. It's a shell name, Maya said. But the IP trace leads to the same California address tied to the Howrage Foundation. Ethan exhaled slowly. So the footage wasn't a leak, he said. It was delivery. He turned toward the window, where the city lights blurred through rain. Somewhere across the Atlantic, the Howrage couple smiled for cameras, selling the image of a perfect family. Meanwhile, the files telling a very different story were locked deep beneath the palace, waiting for the moment the world was ready to believe them. Maya broke the silence. What happens when the phoenix rises? Ethan looked back at her. Then everything they built burns. The following morning, news broke of an impending royal clarification from the monarchy's press office. No one knew what it meant, but speculation ignited. Some said the palace would denounce the leaks. Others whispered it was preparing for something unprecedented, an official audit of lineage claims. Ethan watched from the operations room as headlines scrolled across the monitors. He felt no triumph, only dread. The truth was out, but the cost had yet to be counted. As the hour approached, a message flashed on Maya's encrypted channel. It contained no words, only a file name. Project Ghostline, authorization granted. She looked at Ethan. What's Project Ghostline? He stared at the screen, the corners of his mouth tightening. It's the next phase, he said quietly. The part where we stop chasing ghosts and find the living ones. He shut the laptop. Pack everything. We're not done yet. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. And somewhere, buried in the vaults beneath Kensington, a new set of files began decrypting. Records that would take the investigation beyond metadata, beyond missing hospitals, and straight into the bloodlines themselves. The email arrived at 2:13 a.m. No subject line, no signature, only an attachment labeled for Phoenix, eyes only. Ethan Reeves almost deleted it. Then he saw the hospital crest embossed faintly in the corner of the message window. He hesitated, glancing around the operations room where monitors flickered like restless ghosts. Maya was asleep on the couch, one arm over her face, while the rest of the team worked in exhausted silence. He clicked open. Inside was a single page of text, blurry from multiple rescans. It read, My name is Nurse Eleanor Graves. I was on duty the night they say the Duchess gave birth. No birth occurred. I can prove it. But you must promise me protection. Ethan's pulse quickened. They'd been hunting digital ghosts for months. Metadata, doctored footage, shell companies. But now, at last, a living witness had stepped out of the shadows. The meeting. 3 nights later, Eleanor Graves sat at a back table in a pub on the outskirts of Surrey, hands trembling around a chipped teacup. She looked nothing like the villain or whistleblower Ethan had expected, just a tired woman in a wool coat, her hospital ID still clipped to her bag, as if she couldn't decide whether she was resigning or confessing. "You understand what happens if they trace this back to me," she whispered. "They won't," Ethan said. "Your name won't appear in anything. I just need the truth." She nodded once, eyes darting toward the window. "Then listen carefully." According to Eleanor, St. Helena's maternity ward had been half empty that week. Rumors circulated about a royal booking, but the standard preparations, security sweeps, blackout curtains, sterilized suites, never materialized. Instead, 2 nights after the rumored date, a convoy of unmarked vans arrived just before midnight. The staff were told it was a training simulation for emergency obstetrics. "They brought their own lights, their own cameras," she said. "They told us to clock out early. I stayed because I was curious." "What did you see?" Eleanor swallowed. "I saw them set up a delivery bed. There was a woman,